weekly. New faces, old friends. Welcome everyone. How's today been like for you? Probably some of you are just waking up. You have your morning coffee and have joined us for the quick morning inspiration. Probably for some of you is afternoon, like for us in Europe, or maybe late if you're joining us from Asia. How's your mood? Family's in love. Marisa, okay. Some happy people. Jillian, I don't know what is that? Is that like a All right. Smiley faces. We've got Oliver, Jew, Miriam will be like, lunchtime with butter. Okay, Krista, enjoy. The music you're hearing, you can manage the volume locally if it's too loud for you. My name is Anna Maria, if we haven't met before. I'm leading the Butter Community Project. Very excited to kick off our Learning Lab series today with two amazing panels, one behind us, and this one is going to be amazing because we've got some super inspiring speakers with us today. So welcome. This session is being recorded. I have to mention that before we kickstart. And also the format that we're going for today, it's a fireside chat. So we imagine that we're sitting around the virtual campfire, and I've got a couple of questions to kick us off, but please feel free to use the chat to ask our speakers for your questions, pick their brains, insights, half-baked thoughts that you want to bring into the conversation. Everything counts, and we'll surface those as we go. And we talk about future of learning today because there's lots happening in our space. There's lots of mini bots and AIs and chat GPTs and all those good things that are disrupting the way we work and learn. So we brought some brilliant minds. People are like, no, we brought some brilliant minds to help untangle and make some sense of those things. So thank you so much for playing with me and killing the music for now. Welcome. And I'll start introducing our hosts one by one and welcome them into the spotlight. Give me a sec here. There we go. So we are super, super excited, Pak, to welcome Saba into the spotlight. It's Zach. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hello. I am super excited to have you back sharing the panel stage with me. We had a blast last time. If you are not yet connected with Saba, do so. I'll pop her LinkedIn in the chat in a minute. And Saba believes that cultures of innovation begin with a culture of empathy. Her journey from high school teacher to education executive at Apple to the founder of Designing School has been one of constant innovation and passion for transforming education. Saba has dedicated her career to helping companies and schools foster the mindset and skill needed for success in the modern world. And we talk about future, we talk about modern, so we're very, very excited to see her view on that. She's also the host of Designing Schools podcast, and she shares insights and experience to inspire change in education, long needed change, I might add. And in 2022, last year, she released a documentary called Designing Schools, The Future is a Place We Create, which covers her research about using design thinking to thrive in an AI-driven world. Did I do a good job at covering all of the awesomeness you're doing, Saba? Anything else I'm forgetting?
Way too kind. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. All right. Then I am inviting Marie to join us in the spotlight. Hello.
Hey.
Good afternoon. Marie is a facilitator with over 10 years of experience supporting international NGOs in their growth. She specializes in the design of accessible workshops, doing an amazing work on accessibility, and learning sessions and collaborative processes, and enjoy testing new tech that could shape the work of facilitators and educators tomorrow. So, in her journey of exploration, she fell into the rabbit hole of Web3, blockchain, and no-code tools, and automation, and AI, and machine learning, and all that good stuff. So, she's particularly interested in understanding how this technology might influence how we learn and exchange online, and how to avoid increasing the gap between the digital haves and have-nots. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to join us today, Marie. Anything you'd like to add to this intro?
No, thank you, Maria. Brilliant, brilliant intro. And yeah, I really look forward to exchanging on this, and especially understanding, yeah, what we can look forward to and what we want to pay attention to make sure that the next decade of learning well, the next decades, plural, of learning are as inclusive as they can be. Thank you.
Love that. Perfect. Thank you very much. We've got Scott joining us later, so we'll keep that intro for later. And now I am excited to welcome Emily to the stage. Hey, Em. Hi. Em is the founder and CEO of the facilitation agency Mischief Makers and the creative industry mentorship program called Roots In. She's a front runner with new ways of working and all things hybrid collaboration, hybrid facilitation, distributed companies, and so on. Both virtual and in-person training, designed and led by Emily, have been awarded highest scores by the participants, earning her a central spot in return project with clients such as Spotify and Accenture. Whoop, whoop. She has a great stages such as the Guggenheim in Bilbao, the super famous museum, speaking on topics ranging from educating creativity to the power of facilitation to neurodiverse leadership. And Em, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, especially since today it's a very, very special day for you. I know a secret that no one else knows, and I'm about to spill the beans. Are you ready? Are you ready for me to spill the beans here with everyone? Yeah. Okay, let's do that. So we've got.
Aw.
Emily's birthday.
Thank you.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Shower her in emojis and love. And also, I was thinking that it would be quite nice to gift Emily a virtual present.
Oh my gosh.
So here we are. What will you be giving Emily today? Is it love? Is it wealth? Is it epic adventures? Friendship, health, peace? What do we give her? Stamp on your choice.
I mean, I've got to say, as a butter and facilitation enthusiast, this has got to be one of my favorite ever birthday moments.
Hey, you can say that again and on record. Whoop, whoop. Awesome.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Em, and thank you so much for joining us on your birthday. So this shows us how much you love to talk about future of learning.
Absolutely. Nowhere I'd rather be.
Awesome. You've received lots of epic adventures. You've got a bit of love sprinkled there, some health, some good friendships. No one wishes you well. I'm going to pay that lots of money to shower to come your way. May you have an amazing year.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, perfect. Well, now we're all set. Scott is joining us later. And again, feel free to use the chat to pop your questions in there. And I'm going to kick us off, kick the creative juices with my first question. So maybe we can go and have a bit of an elevator pitch style and answer the question, how do you see the future of learning for the next 5 to 10 years? And in true facilitation style, we're going to pass the talking stick from one to the other, right? So I'm passing this one to Saba. There we go, Saba. Elevator pitch, where are we going? Where's learning going?
Yeah, I feel like I would say self-directed,
We can't wait for other people to create it for us. I think it's going to have to be us taking the initiative to really design what we want, which is such a tremendous opportunity, but a huge challenge as well. So self-directed. I'm going to pass it over to Emily.
Directed. I'm going to build on interconnected. So I really love, and we see with the Roots In program as well, professionals with young talent, with members of the community, family, like every part of the journey and the spectrum of society that we have interconnected. So learning isn't something that's happening alongside life. It's something that's happening completely connected, interwoven with the lives that we're all trying to build. And I'm going to pass it on to Marie. Over to you.
Thank you. I think for me, the future of education is hyper-personalized. It's one of the things I'm most excited about, is that it's never been easier and cheaper to provide hyper-personalized, customized learning paths for people. And this also feeds very nicely into one thing I'm very happy about, which is universal design for learning, which I'll tell you all about in some of the later questions. And I think it's really going to lower the barrier for entry for educators and course designers who want to create as diversified and as personalized an experience as possible for their learners. Yeah. And passing it back to Anna Maria.
Thank you so very much. And you've opened the door there for the perfect segue question, because just in the panel before that, we talked about learning as a journey and cohort-based courses, and how do we learn both synchronously, asynchronously, and how hard it is to scale those programs, and how our AI friend might help us in that personalization of those respective journeys, right? So, Marie, you've brought it into the conversation. So my next question is, with the rise of automation and AI, how do you envision the skills landscape evolving over the next decades? What skills do you think will be in high demand? And how do we ensure that both education as preparation for the world of work, as well as organizational upskilling programs, prepare individuals for this changing job market, let's call it like that? And Maria, I'm starting with you because I think that's kind of a sweet spot for you.
Yes, I think because automation and artificial intelligence will make it easier than ever to essentially create content and to create highly personalized content, the skill that we will still need humans to learn and to acquire is the ability to coordinate and to facilitate the collaboration with other humans. And to move away from leadership styles that were maybe more directed, and really understand what it takes to make people with different personalities, different abilities or disabilities, and different levels of connection, synchronous, asynchronous, working in different time zones, and so on. I think this is going to be the kind of facilitative skill that's going to be really valuable, because that is still something that we cannot code into a system, and that the system may suggest, but we'll still have to use our emotional intelligence to understand whether this fits the situation or not. I think that's going to be the super skill of the workforce of tomorrow. And I'm still not 100% sure how we teach that, but I'm looking at Emily, because I'm sure Emily also has some ideas about how we teach the next generation of leader facilitators with highly collaborative skills. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll happily pick the stick up from there, indeed, because I would totally agree that the bit that we wouldn't want to replace right now, or, and I don't know where tech will get to, but it's really that building that human connection. And we often talk about now with the power of hybrid and virtual, and how efficient sync and async kind of dynamics can be next to one another, that the time you do spend together is that you should only do the things then that you can only do when you're together. Like, that's the quality time. Like, spend that time doing things you can only do when you do together. If you look at that flip the classroom model, there's so much learning that can happen self-directed or async, and with the support of AI and tools also like chatbots or other things to help with that accountability. And that's the pitfall, right? quite often, right? With self-directed learning, like phase off, I'll forget to do it. So it can help track progress. It can help support us, keep us accountable, nudge us, share the right content at the right time and make it more kind of bespoke. But when we are together in person, we're using that to fuel the that peer learning. What is the perspective that you had that I didn't have on my own, and how can we use facilitation to help unlock and bring that out? And in terms of making sure that we have leaders or facilitators ready to meet the future of that, it's really about leaning into things like hybrid. Like recently, I'm really surprised that I'm hearing so much pushback against hybrid. Because look at Kodak, like, you know, this is a story as old as time. Like, oh no, it's not gonna, we're not gonna switch to digital film. Or with AI art isn't real art. You know, you can resist against it and then be taken over by it, or you can work with it and embrace it and lean into it. And I think if we can really help upskill leaders and managers and trainers and teachers and in how to lead in the hybrid landscape, which you definitely can, and it can be very interactive and very connected and very human and very wonderful, then that's how we can kind of get the next the leaders ready for tomorrow, in my humble opinion.
Hot take right there. Saba, are you team AI is going to revolutionize how everything, or are you team, hey, let's hold our horses for a while and see what's happening?
I'm team, let's listen to people. I think, you know, it's really interesting. I think you know, when we talk to people, it's funny you say hybrid, you know, just this week, almost every single company has now mandated, like kind of like where we are, that most people come back to work. And the really, really big companies like Vizio, Disney, like Apple, like, you know what I mean? Like we're seeing this trend everywhere, and we're seeing it in like schools and everything as well. And I think that there's two really big themes that I think are really hard to address, but need to be in order to kind of answer that question of where do we want to go? And that is mindset. You know, I think we throw around words like collaboration so easily. And I think if you're comfortable with it, it's great. But one of the things that we learn from sort of like the K-12 space is you have spent the first almost 20 years of your life being taught that there's only one winner, that there's only one person who gets to come out on top, that one person needs to be the one to share the idea, that's how you get that that's how you move up in the world. And it's such a big mindset shift for so many adults to now be like, wait, it's not my idea, it's our idea, but somehow that's still going to allow me to be successful and move forward. And so I think a lot of these technologies and things like that really threaten our identity. I really have been so obsessed with the book. I can't stop. I keep rereading it, like the book Atomic Habits, where he says like our habits shape our identity and our identity shape our habits. And if you look in like education, like, or if you look at any of the ideas we're talking about, they're not new ideas, right? Like, especially in schools, like Dewey all the way back in like mid 1800s is talking about this. Yet we've struggled to sort of create the environments. And because we've always had conformity, compliance, tradition, that those are our habits. And so I really like, the one thing I encourage people is like, don't even come up with an answer right now. Just bring your people together to talk about how they're feeling, because when you unpack that, you then will empower people to design for themselves what it is they want to see moving forward. So it's such an exciting time, but it's also, I think, so emotionally complex.
And you're talking about schools, Saba, and how, you know, that's how we were used to work in schools, that it was the individual and so on. But many of the companies nowadays, the promotions get done based on the individual performance. So there are performance reviews, and they rarely we sit there to evaluate the team as a whole, right? So there's still a lot of praise, I guess, when it comes to the individual success. And the way we praise teams should also start to pick up. How do we look at it? How is the team innovative? How did we function as a team? How well did we do? How well do we collaborate? And where can we improve there? There's a lot of emphasis, especially from learning. Now speaking with my learning L&D hat on, there was a lot of focus on the individual learning journey, the individual upskilling, the individual reskilling, etc. Very rarely, how do we actually build high performance team? How do we boost collaboration? How do we look at ways of working? That was something that L&D teams in companies have almost never touched, ways of working. how do we get better at how we collaborate and how we communicate. That was not a thing. So then that was the leader's role, right? So how do we support the leaders to ask those questions and make sense of some of those thoughts? And whether we want it or not, I think technology is a bit what Em was saying with hybrid. The world is moving, so whether we want it or not, it will eventually come up upon us, right? So I'm curious to see what are some of the challenges that you foresee whenever we talk about technology in general or learning technologies, and the way we adopt them or we implement them. And Saba talked a bit, I think, touched into this mindset, and there's a lot of fear and resistance to change. So what are some of these challenges we see? And even more important than that, how do we think we can go about them? How can we make sure that we're ready to receive these new technologies and make use of them as what they are, actually tools, right? Tools to help us get better at what we do. And I'll direct this to Emily.
Thank you. Well, I actually want to backtrack a little bit to something that you were just saying, Anna Maria, when you were talking there about the focus on teams rather than the individuals, rather than like those individual learning journeys or leadership, because that's actually something that we've seen a real shift in Mischief Makers in the past year, even the past half year, that there's been a real adoption of. So what we do is organizations hire us to run their high stakes events, like when they bring people together, so offsites or leadership retreats or so on and so forth. And it used to be that it was very much like, come and do the offsite, we'll do that, great. And there's that feeling, right, of this being a moment in time. Like, we're going to talk about our ways of working, how we're living our values, how like, it's off, our values are off the walls and into the halls, and we're living and practicing them. But it's in those 2 days that we come together. Great, we promise we'll do that. And everybody leads and carries on like normal. But actually this is now evolving much more into like longer like runways of like team cadences and rhythms. And we've seen a real merge from where we used to work with facilitation training, like helping people transform their meetings, and capability building, how to like host and lead meetings, or how to have leaders pick up facilitation skills within managing hybrid or remote teams, for example. And then we would have the offsites. And now these are definitely merging into where we're like, the offsites are a moment where we discuss and uncover and align on these things. Then we see which capabilities we need to build throughout the year, and what touch points we need to come back and reflect and say, how are our ways of working within the system that is our organization? Is it serving our business priorities? And then we can adapt and revisit. So that's what I mean about this kind of integrated training approach as well. So it's not just like, we need to learn how to do presentations. It's very much built from the offsites, and then there's a track that it runs from there. And it's much more bespoke that way, and it's much more true to what the organizations need. And it's less kind of trainings and offsites. It's these integrated journeys.
I love that, Emily, because ultimately I feel like what you're getting at is building capacity of individuals. And I think it's something that people, like when I say in the beginning, like that's why I say it's so self-directed, because we see so often people wanting permission or people waiting for CLs to change a situation for them, instead of like, I heard something amazing from Satya Nadella, like this morning. He was doing an interview with Ryan Rolensky on The Path. And he said, if you like do what you need to do before you get that position. Like, how do you build that capacity within yourself to lead something, to change something? Like, I always speak from the school lens, but like, I feel like so often people are like, well, we have testing, or we have the state that puts this policy in place, or we have this, like, we're constantly thinking of the constraints, but like, that's where the creativity happens, as they say. But you need sort of like those structures, those frameworks, that capacity building to help people feel like they have permission to, oh, wait, I can be the one to change even the smallest thing, like a cadence building, like you're talking about. Small change, big impact. And I think that's where it compounds over time. So I love that.
Yeah. And it's like you said, Seba, as well, like that bring the people together to discuss, because we don't know, like we're right on the forefront. We're talking about like facilitators, like are pretty much the architects of the new world of work, because we're bringing people together and helping them make sense of, okay, what is our hybrid policy? How are we going to do this and that? And rather than leadership or anyone saying, okay, it's going to be this, let's try it out. It's bringing people together, discussing, trying it out and iterating on that rather than, pulling it out from the air.
I'm interrupting your awesome bounce of ideas for a quick moment. First of all, Scott is here. Hey, Scott, welcome to the stage.
Hi, Scott.
I am honored. Yeah,
Yoo-hoo!
these are role models of mine. Thank you. It's
Hey,
great to
tell
be
me
here.
about it. Tell me about it.
Vice versa. I just came to know you.
I know. It's so fun.
And doing a quick intro,
Sure.
Scott, he is working to scale education as the MVP of learning at MetaGrafters, founder of Atri.gg. How do we spell that? Is that the right way to? Yeah. And the Atri podcast with MetaCrafter, he's training students on next gen jobs like Web3 development and AI. So you're there kind of making sure that everyone else, people that have to learn all of these new skills, are equipped and they have the best environment and context to get that information. Welcome. I'm super happy to have you here with us, Scott. We kicked off the conversation already, lots of insights,
Of course.
and also taking advantage of me chatting right now to invite everyone else in the room to plot their questions in the chat, their insights, their thoughts, stuff that surfaces as you hear us talk about the future of learning, and we'll surface them as we go. All right. So I'm going to bring in one topic, which is quite close to Maria. Of course, she's doing a lot of work when it comes to inclusivity and accessibility. And I think that we talk a lot about the future and take place such an important role into that. But if we look at the world, how many people are left out of that conversation actually right now as we keep on talking about where the world is going? So whether we talk about actual economical resources, whether we talk about something as simple as a stable internet connection, accessibility to a laptop where all you have is it's a mobile, or aging population, etc. So this is I'm very keen to hear, how do you how do we make sure, or how do we even start having the conversations around the future of learning being accessible and inclusive for all individuals, regardless of their background, their circumstances, and what steps can we take today to address these issues and provide equal access to education, training, work opportunities? And I'm passing this this question to Marie, and then feel free, the rest of you, to add to that conversation, Marie.
Thank you. I think this is a really important topic because, of course, the future of learning, we don't want it to be just for a lucky few. I think there's one thing that worries me there, but there's also something that gives me hope, which I've hinted at before. The thing that worries me, of course, is the digital divide. When I ask ChatGPT, like, what is the future of learning made of? It tells me about, AR and VR and immersive experiences. And I'm like, that sounds so cool. But for some people, just getting access to a headset is beyond even first, having access to a laptop, or having access to a stable internet connection, having access to the kind of equipment that allows you to partake in kind of like the groundwork of what is happening online. I think COVID has shown us that it's a lot of learning experiences can take place online or in a way that is hybrid. But of course, we need people to have the right equipment to partake in this. So I think here it's really a call to continue advocating for methods and for ways of learning that are accessible, but also to make sure that people have access to the right equipment and not just be, let's say, I think the immersive learning with AR and VR sounds so exciting, but it's like the shiny thing that we're looking at. And I think focusing on, proper access to the internet, proper equipment to partake in learning activity would be, for me, like a much better, much bigger priority. The one thing that makes me very excited is, as I mentioned earlier, with AI and automation, it's never been easier to actually make universal design for learning a reality. And for the people who are not quite so sure what UDL is, the idea is that you provide learning that can be perceived through different means, that can be engaged with through many different means, and that can be essentially where you can show what you have learned through many different ways. And so this hyper personalization and hyper individualization of the different learning paths that you can generate for learners, I think is a lot more accessible. And I guess the barrier to entry for educators is going to be lowered. I think both in like earlier education, because we're also hinting at this, but I think, and I hope also as well for adult learners, because whenever I speak to people who educate beyond, let's say, university or the level of college, it seems that we design as if everybody is learning the same way through the same kind of means and learns, everyone gets the same one size fits all kind of learning. And we kind of assume that people with disabilities have somehow vanished, or they're like poof, like they disappeared into thin air from the workforce, or maybe we anticipate that we don't hire them. And so I see a lot of corporate training that does not include any of these methods, because the assumption is, well, one size fits all, and that's what you're going to get. So I'm really hoping that UDL can become more mainstream, both in education, and also that using these tools and these technologies to our advantage, we can make it more easily accessible and give people many different ways of learning that are more basically what I would have liked to have when I was in school, essentially. Having different ways of engaging. Maybe it's a group exercise, maybe it's individual. Maybe I'd rather write an essay. Maybe I'd rather have like a mock debate, or however, all the many different ways that we can showcase how we learned and how we engage with others. I think that for me would be like my hope. And I think hopefully also becoming a lot more accessible as well. I'm not sure what the others think about this, and what they might propose are the solutions to fix this digital divide. That's going to be like an obstacle we must confront if we want to make this future of learning available for all.
Scott, do you have anything from where you're standing, Scott, from the forefront of educating on AI and all of these new things? Is that even a conversation? Like, do you guys talk about inclusivity? Is that top of mind? What do you see happening in your environment? I'd be keen to hear.
I think that's exactly why we do what we do, which is essentially train people on skills that can get them a massive increase in quality of life in a very short amount of time. So in 30 days, how do you learn a skill that increases your income 2 to 3x? I think that what Marie was talking about, which I think is so important, is I've heard it called the Matthew effect, which is essentially from the book of Matthew. So the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, because usually technology favors those who have access, have social economic support to use it, have technology already. So there's obviously lots of solutions needed. I think the easiest one is rethinking how we credential and track what is learning. I think there's a big difference between learning and education. So education is, getting the credential for learning the thing, and learning is like, I watch a YouTube video, my brother shows me, I go to school, and there's lots of ways for us to learn. So there's really interesting work being done with technology that I think helps those that maybe don't have technology, which is essentially how do we use AI and Web3 technology to track your skills, right? No matter where you learn them. So if you're a lifelong learner, you don't have to go back and get the continuing ed credit. Like you can demonstrate through a portfolio or through something else. An employer can actually see that you have the skills by using machine readable credentials, right? I don't need to call the registrar because I have it in my digital wallet. So these are called like learner employment records. A lot of work being done by the IEEE that I'm a part of, which is like a credentials body or like a standards body, World Bank and others. So I think that's like that's an interesting solution, and it's not 100% solution, but it does help everyone regardless of where they are, because essentially as an employer, I can feel safer hiring someone from Mozambique, even though they never went to school, because they can demonstrate that they can code or they can weld or whatever it might be. I think a really fun project, I'll put a link in the chat, is Migrants, which is in Italy. So they're actually working with refugee populations to train them in high demand jobs before they get to their new country. 500,000 people have been trained, and 86% of them are still in the job 6 months later. So when you think about unlocking opportunity in like a short amount of time, there's a lot that we could do.
Yeah, I really love that, because I really think I think a lot of times when we talk about this, we talk about it in absolutes, like the rich get this, the poor get this, and that's what happens. And I think it's a little bit of like a fallacy. I don't necessarily think that that's like as accurate, because while yes, like we absolutely have a digital divide, you know, this is, again, it's so fascinating to me how like so many of these ideas have been said for so long. Yeah, we're still kind of stuck in the same place. But like one of my favorite researchers, like Paul Atwell, talks about like it's not just solving for the digital divide, it's like what actually happens when people get that technology. Because usually what ends up happening, and you know, I often actually see that it's the richer kids, the more affluent kids who actually struggle more, because while yes, they have the technology, they also have the pressure to be as traditional as possible, still stay on that same college career track, still focus on the high GPA. Whereas sometimes the students that don't have that environment get to kind of play around more, have a bit more perseverance, get to leverage things. So one of the things that I think has become increasingly important is your mentorship along the way, which goes back to that human connection, right? Ultimately, like if you have somebody who can help you identify your skills, your strengths, how to articulate them, whether you're a refugee or whether you are, you know, an affluent person, you know, who living in like one of the best parts of the world, your opportunities can definitely, you know, like you have access to things if the person who is there in front of you is able to help direct you and leverage those skills and strengths. And I'm always really fascinated by like the influencer space in that regard, because what's so interesting to me, and this is definitely, again, it's not an absolute, but I think these are the stories and the whys we need to lean into. So many influencers were not great at school, did not come from wealthy backgrounds, yet, you know, were often overlooked in their environments because they weren't doing things the way they were supposed to. And as a result, saw an opportunity, played around, and were able to like take their careers to these exponential heights, which you could actually argue is so much harder to do, right? Because there's so many new skills you have to learn, way harder than like doing that typical textbook learning. But I think there's so many different things happening and so many different things people are doing that if you lean into the, well, how did you do that? And how can we scale those things? How can we bring you in and create those collaborations and partnerships? You actually can, I think, expand access and opportunity for people based on their scenario, instead of trying to give everybody the one size fits all model, because we somehow believe that affluent people are more successful. Mental health rates, suicide rates, so many things are actually worse for those communities than they are sometimes for other ones. Again, not absolutes, but I think when we talk in absolutes, we make this impression that just because rich people have this, they're somehow better. And that's what we should give the poor people because they don't have the things that they need. Whereas oftentimes they do, it's just not leveraged maybe in the right ways.
Hearing all of you speak here has really made me think back to as well this adaptability. So my mum was in education, but kind of preschool education, and we lived in a space that there was really kind of where I grew up, kind of the class system is really prevalent in the UK. There is kind of like working class and middle class, and my mum being in education, all of the talks around the dinner table were around like access and education and the system and the politics around it. And I grew up with therefore a passion and interest for education. So we would talk about kind of emerging education, alternative education, like the forest school, even like Montessori, like different things that was happening. And I was like, oh, great. Like this, I would love to like explore this in the future. And my mom was really an advocate of like such a small portion of society will be able to access this cutting edge, like, yes, incredible forms of education that really nourish the learners and help them thrive. Like we have a government, we have state schools, and the majority of our society will go through these state schools. So even though there are these brilliant like alternative education spaces going on, we really need to look inside the little ways that we can influence and feed and support the mass education that is happening. And I think to Marie's point there as well around, it can be like, it is so alluring right now for us to talk about the future of education and to look at like, what can AI do? What can VR do? But if we really want to talk about the future of education, we should talk about the future of mass education and how we can influence that right now as well. And I think to come back to hybrid, for example, right now, or virtual, one of the key things that we always like want to continually encourage educators or leaders to think about isn't how can we fully leverage all this different tech. What is the hybrid choreography? What is the tech choreography? But like with a phone or with a laptop with a webcam, how can we already make hybrid work? And that's like fully, and that's the choreography and the skills that we need. And then therefore, as tech does become, go past the early adopters and into the masses, then to Saba's point around like, it's about adapting and the influences and other people. I saw in the chat here as well, someone quoted Sir Ken Robinson, who's my absolute hero, about having, learning how to learn. Like for educators and within the education system, this is how we meet the future of education, or the future is we learn those base skills and then we adapt with the tech that becomes accessible and that becomes mainstream. But we need the cutting edge, to your point, Scott, as well, because there is so much exciting potential there, and how to like explore that and then feed it in. I think is where we're going to see the best, most exciting things happen.
What's the MVP for massive adoption to happen, right? Like, what's the minimum for maximal value in order to multiply that? I love this so much. I have to surface some of the questions from the chat. And Oliver, do you want to come off mute and ask your question, maybe? Okay, I'll surface that one. How can you build individual learning paths or experiences? It's really, really hard. And I guess AI to the rescue here. Hey, what have you seen? Like, how do we do that? Because individualized learning paths and experience, that's still a dream for many of us. We're not there yet, as in general. So, what trends you're seeing? Are we getting there? What are some key players? How does that look like how will that look like in the future? Who'd like to take this one on?
So I would love to share the story, because this is what the documentary was all about. And that is, it's a public school in San Diego, California, called Design 39. And they're doing this like from a really young age, right? Because that's the one thing, right? Like if you can help young people do it, then ultimately, like, as they get older, like that's your society, that's your future, that's your everything. But one of the biggest shifts that they made was allowing teachers to work together. And I think if you can take that concept and then you can think about it within whatever organization you're working in, it's such a game changer. I think, yeah, it's absolutely hard for one person by themselves to be figuring out all the different changes in the world and also try to figure out your individual learning path. But if you can allow people to come together from a place of their strength to collaborate, right? Goes back to kind of what we were talking about in the beginning, and go back to collaborating with each other. Well, now we each have our different lens. And we're able to now do that work in a much more manageable way. I think this idea that, one person can kind of take it on is hard and a little unfair in many ways as well. And I think this is where you see some of the potential of the AI. Like, what are the things that prevent me from doing that work? I think that's the first question you have to start with. Why is it hard to create individual learning paths, right? And I think if you can break down what makes it hard, then you can say, okay, what can we delegate, right? It's like when you're starting a business, like there's so much to do. It's hard. Okay, what makes it hard? Marketing. Okay, great. I'm not good at marketing. How do I get somebody to help me with that and outsource that? And I think that's where that AI piece becomes really helpful, when you begin to think of it as a partner and a collaborator in addition to the people you have with you. It's a fun example.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Anyone else to this whole personalizing, hyper individualization of experiences? Anything you'd like to share that wasn't added?
I can tell you how we approach it. Like what we're doing with Metacrafters is we're training people on next gen jobs, specifically in Web3 development and in AI. But the way we think about it is you have your learning objectives and skills that they have to learn. And if they can come and show those skills, then they take what they need to finish it, right? So you can have like a fancy tech solution, which I think can solve things, but also you can just say, hey, you have to learn these 3 things, and like just show me that you know those 3, and like however you did it. So it can be like pretty manual too. Like, can you speak Spanish? Like we've already done this in language. It's really easy. Hey, I don't care if you learned at home or you took a trip when you were 8 or you studied on Duolingo, right? Like as long as you can show this. So how do you show what you know? And I think for teachers, just thinking about that is really powerful. I also put a tool in the chat I love. Bodo Honan has this tool called Knowledge AI, which basically does curriculum design with AI. So you can put any video or link in, and it'll create quizzes and things for the classroom. I think that's really important because a teacher should be able to, like we talked with Montessori, like go where the conversation goes. So in adaptive, it can be, here's this pre-designed map and go find the stuff, or it can be, here's where the class has interest, let's go that way. So even though I have, you know, my I don't know, have my Blackboard created already, I can still move to another area. I can get rid of my old quiz and create a new one, right? So like some of those AI tools can help with that, like logistics, I think.
Can I ask you a question, Scott?
Oh yeah, please.
Okay, amazing. Because like I feel like we're seeing this all the time. So like I think back to like when like iPads first came out and all that type of stuff, and just like we haven't really seen, like, yeah, we've seen some good things along the way, but we haven't seen the transformation kind of, you know, the ones that we wanted. So when you see tools like that, I sometimes get worried that that just perpetuates the traditional model of things. Here's a way to do your quizzes easier. Here's a way to do this easier. And so we do more of the same thing without giving people the time and space to kind of think like, okay, well, now that that's there, how do you get rid of it to be able to do the things you want to do? So I'm just curious to kind of hear your thoughts around, I guess, balancing that dichotomy between making people's work easier, but also shifting to like learning the stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that there's like the bridge, right? Like people like to say, this is how I did it, so it works. So there's that like comfortability. I think it has to go towards demonstration, right? And I do think like the digital credentials is exciting because you can add what you've built. It's not, I got an A, right? It's like, here's what I built. And so that's where I'd like to see the tools going, is more towards how do you demonstrate what you've built in a way that doesn't fit on like a piece of paper, right? So yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question though, and it's like, yeah, how do we bridge that, right? So at least we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we need a better way to demonstrate, I think.
I wonder as well, and I don't have the answer to this, but to your point, Scott, before, but around like how do you show what you know, demonstrate it. And Marie, I think you were talking earlier about the with universal learning, like can the bit that you submit be a podcast, or for you, or like an essay for you, or can you do a demonstration to like step away from the more traditional kind of evaluations or like submissions to show that you can meet those learning objectives? And I guess that becomes tougher, or we've experienced as well, when you will then, if we do need to like give people credentials and we need to assess, and there's lots of different like kind of formats or ways that again, I'm thinking about mass education. How do we support educators or this part of the process if there are things coming in different ways? Because I totally agree that we've got the learning objectives, the journey that you take, it like should be different for each person. And I've been thinking of learning journeys more recently, more like as music or as a song. Like, there are the different instruments you can play. Pick the instruments that you love the most. If you love kind of getting stuck in and like learning by doing, if you love didactic learning, whatever. But yeah, I can go off on a different piece there, but I would love to know, are there different ways? Yeah. How do we support that kind of assessment or offering credentials when there are so many different ways that learners can show what they know?
All right.
Yeah, I love the idea that Scott mentions in the chat, which is peer assessment. And I'm guessing then the peer assessment is part of the assessment piece, right? So you have the peer assessment, and then you also have the educator or the course leader looking at this. And I like that. I really like the idea of giving people different ways. But yes, of course, if this one chooses, a portfolio and this one chooses interpretative dance, then where do you find yourself as an educator to try to figure out who is achieving who is meeting the mark that you set for them? So I like the almost like 360 potential peer assessment as one of the elements. Is that what you're thinking of, Scott, here?
Yeah, that's kind of how we do it. I mean, we have a benefit in a lot of our material. It can be quantifiably graded, like does the code run or not? But what we hear from employers, like we ask them, what do you need? And we teach what they need. The biggest thing they want is communication. So what we do is we have every student do a 5-minute Loom video walking through their code. And then we have peers grade it. And then as students graduate, they get hired on as peer mentors. So we also want to give our students like paths towards jobs. So it's, it's both like the TA model and university, just reimagined at scale. So, you know, we're at 6,000 some students, and that is working so far. And it also, employers can then watch that video instead of doing an interview. So it saves them a ton of time, and they get a sense of the candidate. So that's, you know, more towards the professional education than probably high school, college, but I think it does provide a path that isn't often done. You know, you're not often grading your peers at any stage.
Right, we've got a couple of more minutes, and I'm surfacing Krisa's question from the chat. Krisa, do you want to come off mute and ask a question? All right.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling in the chat to find the question.
Yes, it's also on the pin messages as well. I pinned it.
But yes, my question was in regards to AI and ChatGPT, what your thoughts were on this technology that as it's progressing, as I've heard a lot of opinions from different conversations, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well, whether they're positive or negative, and how you think it will impact the future of work.
We'll do a bit of rapid fire for this one and see if we can get one last question in. So rapid fire to Krisa's question. AI, ChatGPT, will they impact the future of work positively, negatively? What do we think? Like, where does it go? Somewhere in the middle?
Yeah,
I think it's
good.
up to you. It's literally, it's up to you. I think if you look at social media, it's a great example. People have used social media to change their lives and create incredible impact. People have used social media to destroy the world in so many different ways. And I think a really good author on this is Kai-Fu Lee. If you haven't read his book, it's absolutely incredible. He says, actually, humans, one of the hardest things for us in this age is being able to even imagine what it is we can do if we don't have to do the things that we do right now, the things that even we hate. The most mundane tasks, if you can take them all away from people and say, if you didn't have to do any of that, what would you do? You're stumped for an answer. It's one of the hardest things, but I think there is no right or bad. Like, you have the agency to model and create what it is it could be. And so, yeah, I don't think it's an either or.
Yeah, I think I said in the chat, AI should stand for always iterating, because it really forces you to be creative, you know? And so I think it kind of comes back to what we've been talking about. Like, you really need, there's no excuse because of AI, right? Like, I don't need to be good at drawing. I can imagine a drawing and then share it. And what I'm seeing trend in tech is everything's becoming more abstracted anyway. So right now you have to be fairly good at writing a prompt and saying which words and how much weight. It's all going away, you know? So you could say like cat with blue hat, and it's going to automatically assume all these prompts underneath it. So it's just going to get easier. But cat with blue hat's pretty boring, right? So like, how do we come up with cooler images? How do we come up with more unique things? And that's what I think Saba's getting at, is it really comes back down to the individual creativity and ideation.
And how we utilize them. Like, I just think we've not even scratched the surface of how these tools are going to be integrated and used. And also to, like, as Maria's been discussing as well, in terms of neurodiversity and access and accessibility, things like ChatGPT, like to help you, like, have a base to then work from, like if that can support you if you're dyslexic or if you're ADHD, or in many different scenarios. So I think, like, we could, much to Saba's point, we can't even imagine where this is going to go, and I hope it's not used for great evil. But
at least no one that's here in the chat will use it for great evil, so that's reassuring. Saeed, do you want to come off mute and ask your question? It's the last pin question. Let's see if we can have it. And also, Saba, if you can drop the book in the chat, that would be really good, the book that you referred to. Saeed, over to you.
Sorry, I have my niece on my lap. That took me a sec.
Fine.
There are several talks from Sir Ken Robinson, if you know him, about education and learning, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, there should be classes about how to learn instead of what to learn. So, any thoughts on this, especially for adults? Thanks.
Thank you, Saeed. So should we, is this part of the future of learning, or is this part of a past that we never really got to fulfill? Learning how to learn, is that a thing? Should we put that like big, write it high on the agenda going forward?
I think so,
nodding
yeah.
heads.
1,000%.
I
Like,
always think when people, you know, in order to learn how to learn, we often forget that you have to unlearn so much. And I think that's the hardest part for so many adults who are trying to do this for young people or for people who are trying to do it for anyone. Like, you have to help people first unlearn a lot of the things that they are so familiar with to be able to build that pathway for themselves to get to where they need to go. There's like so much has been conditioned.
and it's so hard
Fascinating.
because like I have kids, and like whenever I do something different than my parents did, it feels like I'm criticizing my parents, you know, like how they fed me or whatever. So it's like, I think that's a really big part of it, is it's hard for educators to do something different because it almost feels like you're criticizing those who taught you. So but I think it's essential. And even taking it further, I think what Finland's doing around like learning how to interpret information and understand disinformation is really fascinating. And it's probably learning how to learn is probably important for our democracy to take it further, and like the safety of our populace. So I'd go yes and on that one.
Yeah, I triple click. Totally agree. There's I was trying to even look it up. I'm going to butcher the quote, so I'm not even going to try and say it, but there's a great quote around people who think that they know everything, or the people who think that they know, like, the future is for the people who know that they don't know and are curious to keep learning. And like we said earlier, like, we're right on the forefront of so much of this, of hybrid, of virtual. Look at lockdown and everybody learning how to work remotely. Like, we're on the front, and knowing that we don't know, and then experimenting and adapting. I think the future skill for the world of work, for the world of education, for everything, is adaptability. So just like always iterating, being the what AI stands for. I love that, Scott. And I also love
Brilliant.
so great shout out to him.
Hey. We are, don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. Whoop, whoop. I love how we did, and on that note, thank you, everyone. I'm inviting all of our participants to drop a takeaway, one takeaway from today's conversation. What is it that you're taking away? Whether that's something you want to research further, something you want to dip your toes into, an insight, something that stuck with you. Drop them in the poll that you're seeing on the left side of the screen. Thank you so much, Marie, Emily, Saba, and Scott, for accepting my invite to bounce off some of these ideas. There's lots to discuss. There's so much we know, especially so much we don't know. But as long as we continue to gather and have these conversations and see how we see the world from our different perspectives and angles, with a lot of empathy, I think that's how I was mentioning that, a lot of understanding and empathy and openness, we'll be able to yes, Cheska, sorry, yeah, I don't know what it is. I hope you can hear me. Cheska is like, we can't hear you. So thank you very much. Thank you for your thoughts, and I hope to see you very, very soon.
Thank you. I feel like you guys always teach us so much about learning and facilitation just through all your events. So thank you so much for the way you host these. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us. It was really, and thank you to all of my fellow speakers and lovely participants as well. It's been a blast.
Yeah.
And go and celebrate, and happy birthday.
Yeah. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.